Hi, I'm Urvashi Pitre. My blog is TwoSleevers.com, and today we're going to talk about how to use spices to jazz up your food. We're going to talk specifically about spices that you might use for Indian cooking, but then I'm going to show you how those open up just a whole world of flavors for you. So, let me tell you something. When I first came to this country and I realized that there were people who had only ever cooked with salt and pepper, my amazement was vast. I was lucky enough to grow up in a country where we use a lot of spices, we grow a lot of spices, and I know that this is the fun part about Indian cooking for people, but it's also the intimidating part. There's so many spices, you don't know where to start, you have to buy. I'm here to simplify all of this for you. I'm going to tell you the various ways in which you can use spices, and then I'm going to tell you which ones you need, and then we're going to talk about how you can use those very same spices to create Korean food, Ethiopian food, a whole bunch of other different cuisines that you can, as long as you follow the instructions that I tell you and buy the spices in the way that I'm telling you to buy them. So today, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the different ways to use spices. I'm going to tell you which ones you really need, and then I'm going to tell you what else you can use them for. Okay, so let's start out with the different ways in which you can use spices. So here you are at the store, and already the confusion sets in. Are you supposed to be buying fresh turmeric? Are you buying ground turmeric? So fresh or dry becomes a decision. Are you buying a whole spice? Are you buying like whole cumin seeds? Or are you supposed to be buying ground cumin seeds? So whole and ground becomes an issue. And then are you buying this by itself? Or are you buying it in a mixture? Are you buying garam masala ready-made? Or are you buying ground spices to make garam masala, or are you buying whole spices to make it? All of this can be very, very confusing if you've never really cooked with a whole bunch of spices. Okay, let's say that you know what to do, you know exactly what to buy, you come home. Now you have a whole different set of decisions in front of you. Are you going to roast them with oil, or are you going to dry roast them? Are you going to grind them after you've oil or dry roasted them, or are you going to leave them whole? Are you going to be using these spices roasted or unroasted? And then, are you going to use them alone, or are you going to use them in combination with something else? It's so confusing if you don't know what you're doing. But there's a reason that you have spices that are used by themselves, spices that are ground in oil, spices that are mixed afterwards. And once you understand which spices to use how, this is just going to become a whole lot easier for you. So really, just to recap all the combinations I've told you, you can buy the same spice, fresh or dry. So turmeric, for example, could be bought fresh or dry. You could buy it whole, dried, or you could buy it in a powder. You could come home and use it by itself. You could roast it with oil, you could use it by itself, you could combine it with something else, okay? So most good recipes will tell you what, but here's the thing you've just understood, that one spice, turmeric, is not just turmeric. Cumin seeds are not just cumin seeds. You can use them in a myriad different ways. So I mentioned this thing about roasting earlier, and this is actually a very, very critical part of Indian cooking. So oftentimes we do dry roast spices. There's a couple of reasons why you might do that. For when you apply heat to these whole spices, or cumin seeds or coriander seeds, they start to release aromatic oils. You can smell it as you're roasting, right? The whole kitchen has this wonderful fragrance floating, wafting by, and that's what's happening. You're releasing these aroma molecules. The other thing that's happening is you can store these roasted spices for a little bit longer just because you've taken the moisture out of it. And then if you grind them, you let them cool and you grind them, they don't make a paste. You know, sometimes it's just easier to take the moisture out and then grind it, and you don't get as much of a paste, you get a finer powder. So you could roast for preservation, you could roast to release the aroma molecules. But here's another reason you might roast, which is if you're roasting in oil as an example, oftentimes that oil gets flavored with whatever you put in it. So think about when you, say for example, sizzle some garlic in oil. What's happening? That oil, the garlic is becoming beautifully fragrant. It's got this wonderful brown, look to it. You have these aroma molecules being released, and that oil now becomes garlic flavored. The same thing happens when you use whole mustard seeds in Indian cooking, or you use whole cumin seeds or coriander seeds or fenugreek seeds. When they go into that oil, not only does their flavor profile change, the flavor profile of the oil changes as well. This is how you start to build layers and layers and layers of flavor. So sometimes in a recipe, I might ask you to put in whole cumin seeds, and then I might ask you to put in ground cumin, and you're sitting there going, I thought this lady was supposed to be efficient. Why is she asking me to do both? There's a reason I'm asking you to do both. When you bite into a whole spice, that flavor is very concentrated on the tip of your tongue, and that's what you taste. In contrast, when a spice is ground and spread into the food, the whole dish takes on that flavor. You don't suddenly get a bite of cumin like you would if you were biting into a seed. And let me tell you, an oil roasted cumin seed can be absolutely delightful to bite into. So there's a variety of reasons why you might dry roast spices, oil roast spices, etc. But here's the thing that I will tell you that is, in my mind, just non-negotiable. And if you want to do really great Indian cooking, or you want to cook, different cuisines with great spices, please take my advice and buy whole, unground spices. And I'll tell you why. Partly, it's because you can combine them in different ways. They last better, they last for a whole lot longer. If you have a whole spice, you can mix and match in a variety of different ways, versus if you just went out and bought, store-bought garam masala. You have no idea what's in it, and that it's a one-trick pony, that spice. Versus if you had all the ingredients for it, there may be an initial investment where you have to go out and get this, but down the road, it's really, really going to pay off. But here's the main reason. Taste. If you look at whole spices and make your own garam masala or your own spice mix, even if it's a Cajun spice mix, you make your own spice mix versus going out and buying a store-bought one. I want you to take the two and smell them, and the difference is going to be night and day. You do this once and you will always take the 5 minutes it takes to grind your own spices. So if you don't trust me, which you really should, a lot of people trust me on cooking with spices, but if you don't, you should try it for yourself and see the difference in flavors and see if you can notice a flavor. When you grind a spice, halfway across the kitchen, you can tell that a fresh spice has been ground in here. So I'm going to say to you, you should buy whole spices. Now, let me give you a list. And by the way, there's a presentation that you can download for free. There's a PowerPoint and a PDF that shows you all of these spices. But here are the spices that I think you really, really need. Only 2 of these, I'm going to ask you to buy ground spices. So the first one is turmeric. Buy ground turmeric. That'll keep forever. You want that with you. Turmeric, typically you want to cook. If you don't cook turmeric in either oil or, just roasted on top of vegetables, you get this raw, slightly bitter taste. So turmeric needs to be roasted. The other spice I'm going to ask you to buy ground is cayenne pepper. Now, there's a difference between chili powder and cayenne pepper. So if you grow up in India, you think of chili powder as cayenne pepper. But if you live in Texas, chili powder actually has cumin in it, has other aromas in it. So please be sure you understand the difference between chili powder, which I ask you to use in my Texas chili, versus cayenne pepper, which I ask you to use in some of the Indian dishes. Turmeric and cayenne, you are free to buy ground. You want whole cumin seeds. You want whole coriander seeds. You need to get cinnamon. I want you to get whole black cloves and have those set aside. You're going to need whole black peppercorns. So, whether you buy Malabar peppercorns or, Telly cherry peppercorns, just get good black peppercorns that you can find. And then the other thing you're going to need is cardamom. Now, cardamom is going to be, there's the variations you need to understand in cardamom. There are at least 3 types of cardamom that are widely available. There's white cardamom. 4 actually, let's talk about 4. There's white cardamom, there's green cardamom, there's a big black cardamom, and then you can buy cardamom seeds. Okay, the white and the green are interchangeable. You can use whichever one you have. The black one is not interchangeable. The black one has a very piney, tarry taste, and I know that sounds disgusting, but it actually flavors rice extremely well. So there's a basmati pulao recipe where you could use that. But they're not interchangeable with the white and green. Now, when I go shopping for it, typically what I'll do is I'll buy the whole green or white, whichever they have on sale, honestly, but I'll also buy cardamom seeds. The reason that I do that is it's actually extremely painful to sit there and decorticate the little cardamom. I mean, it's that size and you're sitting there, and I don't see as well anymore since I'm more than 40 years old, a lot more than 40 years old. So it's a lot easier to buy it so that, you have the seeds. So if I'm making a powder out of it, if I'm grinding them for a dessert recipe, etc., I'll use the seeds. If I'm putting them in masala chai, which recipe is also on TwoSleevers, in that case, I might use the whole cardamom. So the recipe will tell you if you're using whole or little. Green and white interchangeable, black not interchangeable. Get yourself some in the pot and get yourself some seeds to make your life easier. Now, the other one is nutmeg. So you really do need nutmeg whole, or you need to buy in the small jars, very, very fresh, use it up and throw it away in about 3 or 4 months. So turmeric, cayenne ground, everything else whole. Cumin, coriander, cinnamon, cloves, peppercorn, cardamom, nutmeg. And cardamom in the pot, cardamom out of the pot, okay? If you have these, and I know this sounds like a long list, but trust me, In the long run, you will thank me for this. Your food will taste out of the world. And before you do this, I want you to go into your pantry right now and get rid of all of the spices that you've had, the ground spices that you've had that have been sitting there since, before your 10-year-old child was born. All of that needs to go in the trash. It's totally worth it. If you're not sure about this, what I would suggest is that you go into one of those stores that allows you to get spices from a bin and just buy a little bit for one recipe and try it out and see if you can tell the difference between the two, okay? Hundreds of people, thousands of people in the TwoSleevers groups will tell you there's a huge difference, and many people who cook with spices all the time will tell you there's a difference. Okay, so here we are, we're talking about Indian food and the spices needed for Indian food, and I know there's at least 10 of you out there going, hey, you forgot curry powder. I actually totally did not forget curry powder, but I would like for you to forget about curry powder. Curry powder is an easy way that people have put a bunch of spices together, but we don't actually use curry powder in India. So curry to us is not a dish. Curry means anything that is made with water. So if you make a vegetable, even if the water is boiled out of it, we're happy to call that a curry. So we'll call it an okra curry, we'll call it a chicken curry, we'll call it a cauliflower curry. Anything that has been made with water, we will just indiscriminately call curry. There's no such thing as curry powder. This would be like you saying to me, in America we have a soup powder, or in the UK we have an entree powder. There is no such thing. Every family has its own recipe, so I usually don't call for it unless I'm doing something special, like I'm doing a Jamaican curry powder, which is a particular blend replicated over and over. Or let's say we're making a Japanese curry, chicken curry in a pressure cooker. I use those little cubes for it, etc. But for Indian cooking, I almost never ask you to use curry powder. You can get the same flavor and you can control what goes in it. Some people are allergic to cinnamon. Well, you don't have to use it if you're making it at home. So curry powder is not a spice. When you say I hate curry, you're saying I hate everything that has ever been cooked in water, which is patently untrue. So what I would like you to do is open up your mind and help your family understand the difference between curry powder and curry cooking, which is anything that's made in water. India is a vast country. There are 10,000 Indian dishes. When you say I don't like curry, you're saying I went to this restaurant, they had this chicken dish, I tasted it, I hated it. It means nothing about Indian cooking. It just means you didn't like this one dish. Okay? Now, for the TwoSleevers recipes, it's very, very important that you make the garam masala exactly as I tell you. If you don't do that and you write to me afterwards and go, hey, your butter chicken was bland, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm not going to respond to you, because there's a reason that thing was bland. The reason it was bland is you went out and you bought a store-bought mix. Two problems. One, who knows how long ago that thing was ground, and two, we have seen many mixtures out there that the first ingredient is paprika, and then there is a hint of clove or a hint of cinnamon. It's mainly paprika and it looks red. When you do that, you've lost control over the dish. It's no longer an Indian dish. You probably just made some kind of a paprika chicken, and it is really not the flavor that you should be getting. So if you're going to go to the trouble of making a good Indian dish or a good Ethiopian dish or a good Korean dish, make sure you get the right spices to go with it. Okay. Now, one of the reasons that I do the garam masala the way I do is because when we're growing up in India, we are trained to eat around spices. So you'll put a mouthful of something in your mouth, you'll feel with your tongue the cinnamon or the clove, and you will just very genteelly spit it out and set it aside. Americans are not used to this. They will bite straight into the cinnamon or the cardamom, and then that's all you taste, and you just ruin this beautiful dish that a person made. So using this ground spice, it's cheating a little bit, but you still get the flavor without the biting into it. So again, just to reiterate, there is no substitute for whole spices. There's no substitute for grinding the masala yourself, unless you go into one of these artisan stores where they're making small batch cooking, etc. That's a different matter. And here's why. It's because as soon as you grind a spice, as soon as you open up that seed, it releases aroma molecules, and the smell and the taste of it start to dissipate into the air. So whole spice you could keep for up to a year with no problem at all. The spice will just sit minding its own business until you're ready for it. Once you grind a spice, the clock starts ticking. You've got about 6 or 8 weeks at the most to use up that spice, and I want you to take an old ground spice and smell it. It's gonna smell like sawdust. There's gonna be no aroma left, and that's how you'll know that I'm telling you the truth. So whole spice will keep up to a year. A ground spice will keep about 6 to 8 weeks. Now, if you take that spice and you roast it in oil, you reduce the expectancy even more, because you can, if you're a super taster, which I am, you can taste that oil going rancid once it's been roasted. So just store your whole spices the way they are. Buy the small complement that I told you to. And here's what's going to happen. As soon as you go out and buy these spices, using the very same spices I just called out to you, you're going to be able to make Ethiopian berbere. You're going to be able to make niterkebe, which is an Ethiopian ghee equivalent with a whole bunch of aromatic spices. Oh my God, your house is going to smell phenomenal when you make that. You're going to be able to make Lebanese shawarma. You're going to be able to make a Vietnamese stew. All kinds of chutneys and dips, apple pie spice, pumpkin pie spice, arroz con pollo, everything that goes in there, the cumin, etc. that goes in there. You can make harissa, you can make jerk chicken spice, you can make ropa vieja, you can make refried beans, you can make a whole bunch of spices with the ones I'm telling you to if you buy whole spices and if you save them the way they should be set aside and if you only grind when it's time to use it. So for those of you who've been intimidated, it's actually very, very simple. Go buy the spices I've told you to. Start following the recipes and very, very soon you'll have a sense for it, and your Indian cooking, your Ethiopian cooking, your Vietnamese cooking is going to taste out of this world, fresh, flavorful, and you'll be able to control exactly what went into it. So this is how you get over your fear of just using salt and pepper and your unfamiliarity with spices. I'm Urvashi Pitre. My blog is TwoSleevers.com. Please subscribe to this channel or follow me on Pinterest, Instagram. Come join our Facebook group, and you can learn more about how other cultures cook. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for joining me.